All right, I'm Josh.
I'm Riki.
And welcome to the briefing room. So today we've got kind of a special episode. Well, not only is it our episode 6, so for those of you who have been watching since the beginning, we are truly appreciative of you. But today we've got a special episode because we have brought on our first in-person guest. And so I want to take the time to introduce him. Derrick has been with, right now he's with Shriver Real Estate. He just came over from Century 21. He's been in real estate for about 6 years. He's also a fellow veteran, also did about 6 years in the Air Force. And so we're super excited to have him on today. He's very knowledgeable, and he's going to really be helping us ask some of the questions. So thank you so much for being here today, Derrick.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Big fan of the show. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, we look forward. It's going to be a fun show. Well, last and certainly not least, we would also like to welcome Mr. Matt Jones with Keller Williams Gulf Coast. Matt's been in the business for quite some time, created quite a following, and really built his niche around investments and really multifamily. And that's how you were dubbed Mr. Multifamily, correct?
Mr. Multifamily.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Good to be here.
Good. Yeah, well, we appreciate you being here. Well, I guess, if you want to go ahead and knock it, start off.
Yeah, so Matt, why don't you start by just telling us just a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in real estate, and kind of what got you started in the investment world.
Sure. So, I got out of college at a pretty interesting time. I graduated in 2008, got my Series 7 and 66 so that I could help people with investments. I was 22. I looked 18, and I could put you in whatever you wanted to go into where you're going to lose 40%.
That's the bank trained way.
Really quickly, I had to figure out another career path. And I just remember in the early days watching, Flip This House on A&E and just kind of having an interest in real estate. Bought my first house pretty young. And as I moved up the career ladder, once I finally had time to get into investing on the side, I liked it so much better than my day job that I made the move full-time within about a year of starting my investing career. I got my license and started helping other investors.
Wow.
Man, you graduated the same year as me. So I'm like, what have I been doing with my life that I'm not Mr. Multifamily?
And Matt, you're also an active investor yourself, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. How many properties are you up to now?
So I'm up to 8 properties as of 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Most of those, 6 of those are multifamily, so it's a total of 20 rental units.
Wow.
Wasn't
just last year you and I were talking, you think you were at 10, you've done doubled.
Yeah, I've been able to grow pretty quickly. I didn't have my first tenants in my first property until mid-2016, so it's gone pretty quick. But being in the business has definitely helped me as an investor.
All right. Good.
So what made you switch from being, because you said you started off as an investor, then you went and got your real estate license next. Is that how that worked? Or how did you go from investing real estate back to investing?
So I'd always kind of had an interest in investing. I had an uncle who'd been an agent in the 90s, and he had some investment properties. And back in probably 2014, he moved down to where I lived, which was Mobile, Alabama at the time. And we just started talking investments, and my career had kind of taken off. I was on my second house that I owned personally, and I built up equity when I bought the first one and sold it. And I made a good purchase on number 2, so I got a line of credit. And in 2015, jumped in and bought my first investment. But I was still working, probably 50 to 60 hours a week most of the time in a regular W-2 job.
My gosh, man. Talk about really, going all in, right? You're working your regular job, you're putting all your extra time into investing to make sure, and then you finally pulled the trigger. And we actually brought Derrick in as well because, Derrick is a real estate agent, and sometimes it's really good to have somebody from the field to ask some of the more, specific questions for our other agents who are listening to our show, because that's primarily who our audience is geared at, is definitely realtors and young realtors. And so I wanted to make sure that we brought Derrick in and we give him an opportunity to kind of ask you some questions too. So Derrick, if you don't mind, take over, however you, whatever you have to ask him, we'd love to have you in.
Sure, yeah. Well, I wouldn't call myself a young realtor, but...
No, not you, our audience. Our audience is young realtors. Derrick is not young.
As you called it, seasoned.
Yeah, right. If he wants, seasoned realtor. If he wants to call himself old, he can do that. I don't know.
One of my questions for you, actually, Matt, is when you first got it started, like, what was your first multifamily unit? Was it like a duplex, triplex, or?
As an investor or as an agent?
Either or, actually.
Okay, so I'll tell you about my first venture into multifamily as an agent. I already owned a quadplex at the time, and that was I'd actually lived in. So if anybody's a Bigger Pockets follower, I'd kind of house hacked a quadplex, and I had been active on the Bigger Pockets website and met some investors that were actually referred to me, or they wanted to be investors. They wanted to move here, quit their really good job in Washington, and live the Florida life and invest equity from their house, to make an income here. They didn't end up doing that, but we got along really well. And as we got to talk about investing, we talked about Bigger Pockets, and she said, "Oh, my brother's on that site all the time." So she referred him to me. He's a flight instructor here at NAS Pensacola. So when he came to town, there really wasn't any inventory, and I found a triplex that had expired with another agent. They'd been trying to sell it for 6 months, 12 months, something like that. No luck. So I contacted the owner directly and ended up selling that Bigger Pockets buyer, who's now a good friend, that triplex. And the owner of the triplex owned a second one. And since it went well, a couple months later, he let me list and sell the second one. So that was really how I got into it, was through being an investor myself and through being an active Bigger Pockets member.
Okay. So for real estate agents out there that don't have any, I guess, investment connections, what would you recommend for them to do in order to get out and find those guys?
So probably the biggest thing is to, if you want to work with investors, take an interest in investing. Learn how the numbers work, learn some of the lingo. Because if you like investing, even if you're not an active investor, if you talk about it, people are going to be able to tell that you're enthusiastic about it, and it just kind of attracts people to you. Now I work with a lot of young military buyers who are buying a property with their VA loan, and they tend to refer their friends to me. So really, it's kind of a snowball. That very first triplex snowballed into 3 within a year, and kind of helped me launch my multifamily niche. But if I had not liked investing, it just never would have worked. So, unless you like investing, or at least have an interest, it might not be the right thing to pick. Pick an area that you're really interested in, and then your enthusiasm is going to attract people to you.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that because of your niche in multifamily or investment, that ultimately propelled your real estate career?
It definitely has helped. For one, it is pretty stable. The market as a whole sells a lot more in the spring and the summer. That's not always the case for me. I've had really great Februarys, really great Decembers, where the market is usually kind of slow. So it's great that investors are always looking for good deals. It doesn't really matter if it's Christmas Day. If the numbers are right,
Right.
They're going to step out and run the numbers. So that's been helpful, but it's about 50% of my business. So about half my business is retail buyers and sellers, and about half is investors. So, if you took away that half, I like to think that I would fill it with other business, but it's still a huge chunk for me.
Right.
And I think it's important to note that, one of the things that makes you different than a lot of the other investor-friendly realtors, because we see them all over the place, right? But the big difference that I've noticed here is that you actually were working with investors prior to being in real estate, right? So I think that's an important thing that you brought with you, right? Is you brought a sound knowledge of the numbers, a sound knowledge of the investment aspect of the business, and now you're also bringing the background knowledge of being a realtor. So it's really just giving you a very, very cool niche, like we've been talking about, that's put you in this Mr. Multifamily, which I think is an awesome name, by the way.
So
that's
super
really cool.
curious too, Matt. If you could, explain or share with our listeners, how did you go about getting that name, Mr. Multifamily?
I've been trying to remember that, and I know that people had referred. They're like, oh, you're kind of Mr. Multifamily, and I think that was in the back of my mind when my uncle, who had been in real estate in the '90s, he was telling me about all the crazy campaigns he used to run, just different marketing stuff. He told me I was crazy for quitting my job and getting a real estate license, but then when I did it, he was excited because he got to tell me his old war stories.
Yeah.
And things like, a flyer that said, it showed a picture of a cheetah. It said fastest on land. And then it had whatever the fastest fish was, fastest in the sea. And then a picture of me that said fastest way to sell your house. And he had just crazy ideas like that. So I had fun just creating flyers and mailing them out to the target audience for whatever that flyer was. And one of those was Mr. Multifamily. And it just kind of took off. It is still to date. I put out a newsletter every month to all of the owners of 2, 3, and 4 unit properties in the 2 counties I serve. And that's still by far my best tool, and what I get the best return on for my advertising dollars.
Mm-hmm.
What are you using? That it brings up a good question. Actually, is that you said you send this newsletter out to all of the 2, 3, 4 door owners in your area. What are you using to compile that information? Where are you getting that information? If you don't mind me asking.
No, I don't mind at all. I'm not sure how different areas do it, but our local MLS has a tie into the local courthouse data. It's called CRS, Courthouse Retrieval System. And I can get in there and pull lists. I can export the mailing address or whatever piece of information from the tax roll that I want. So I just go in and filter by that type of property, the 2 counties that I want to work in, and then put together my mailer and send it out to a mailing company to get out for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Seems pretty automated.
Yeah, all the work on my part is in creating the flyer. They do the rest, basically.
Very cool. You have somebody working for you? Do you have an assistant or something, or is it just you?
It's just me these days. Last year I had an assistant. I started a property management company. I was kind of chasing all the shiny objects, and it made sense to me to have property management and invest myself and, then be a real estate agent. But I learned that having too many balls in the air can really take away from what you do. And I actually, after about 9 months, I shut that company down and sold it. It was more work than I was having fun doing at the time.
That's how it typically goes, right? I think we try some stuff. I think as an entrepreneur, we try some things and we're like, yeah, that was fun, but no thanks. We just keep it moving.
Yeah, you kind of always want to see the next opportunity and things interest you, and that was my lesson, that you can't do it all. It's much better to have a specific interest and go really hard at 1 or 2 things.
Right. Find your niche.
Yep. So Derrick, I know you currently have a client that's looking for a multifamily. So I know you're probably itching for questions for Matt as well. I know one in particular that I'm actually really curious about, Matt, is what exactly do you look for in multifamily units that would deem it a good property?
Sure. And before I dig into my criteria, I want to say this, since the audience is investors or is real estate agents who might want to work with investors. It doesn't really matter what you think is a good deal. The more mature I get in the business as an investor and working with buyers and sellers, investors, they all have their own needs and criteria. So the best thing to do is to ask questions, because the phase I'm in of my business is I'm trying to acquire properties below market value and make monthly cash flow. I'm looking for properties that cash flow. But there's other buyers who, they want to live in the property they're going to buy just to get their foot in the doors. There's others who don't care about being below market value. They're just trying to grow as fast as they can, maybe fully leverage. And then there's some people that are, they're really wealthy or they just have a really high income and they're trying to shield some of that. So they would be more interested in appreciation and tax write-offs. So as an agent, the first thing is ask questions and find out what they think is a good deal. Because that's really all that matters. If you want to sell properties, is finding good deals for them.
Right.
My criteria, and I encourage investors to be specific. I'm looking for something I can buy and generally fix up. And when I'm all in, I want to be at least 20% below market value, and I'm looking for it to cash flow at least $200 per door. And then, I'm looking for a certain cash-on-cash return. As the market gets better, I've gotten a little more flexible with that. But, generally 12 to 15%. And those are all numbers that you can't just go out and throw a dart at something on the MLS and hit.
Right.
But because I'm in real estate, it's realistic for me to find 1 or 2 or 3 deals like that a year that would meet my criteria. And because I'm specific, other agents and investors know what I'm looking for, and they can call me with deals too.
So you think we've come away from because I know the golden rule back in the day was 30%, right? You wanted a 30% cash on cash return is what, when I was doing wholesaling, everybody, these investors would call me, all right, well, this is what we're looking for. I want to make 30% back. And I'm like, okay, well, you and everybody else, so good luck. So you're saying that you're cash on cash, you're really hoping to stay around 15% then is a good number for you?
Yeah, that's a good number for me. And honestly, a lot of investors that call me are looking for more like 10. So the numbers come way down as the market has gone up over the last 6 or 7 years. You used to hear investors saying they wanted something, the 2% rule. Do guys know what that is? So if I spend $100,000 on this property, it should rent for 2% of that a month, $2,000 a month. So that used to be kind of the rule people went by when I was first looking at getting into investments. And now they're real defined. No, it's not at all. I mean, you can't buy a 2% property on any kind of regular basis anywhere that I want to buy property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
maybe like central Atlanta, Georgia or something, you might be able to get yourself a little flat out there.
That means like a $200,000 house down here would rent out
for $4,000. Yeah.
Oh,
People would be up and you wouldn't rent it. That's for sure. Those would be all the people not sending you rent checks right now. For sure. Yeah. So would you say that because one of the things I'm always curious about is because there's two sides of the rental or of the investment market, right? You have your people who go in and they do fix and flip, right? They buy quick, they turn around, they want out. And then you have your people who kind of fix it up and then will rent it out and kind of, build a cash flow off of that. Give us some advice for some of our maybe new investors, because I'm sure some of your people are going to be watching this as well. So I want to give them something that kind of gives our first-time investor who's like, oh, do I buy the house and just renovate it and get out of it? Do I rent it out? Give us some advice on that.
I think it makes sense to think about your life and about what you want, and then go with your strategy based on that. I really don't look at a property and think, do I want to flip this one or do I want to keep it as a rental? I know before I ever go look at it that I want it as a rental. And if I wanted to buy a flip, then I would be looking specifically for a flip. But I also know that doing a renovation takes me a lot of time. I'm too, you could call it economical, some people might say cheap, to just hire a general contractor and pay retail prices for my renovations. So I'm generally kind of hiring subcontractors, getting multiple bids, and then supervising the work. So I'm spending a lot of time on a renovation. I can't do that and be a good real estate agent and keep an eye on the properties I already have. So I'm not going to flip personally in this part of my life. If you have a lot of time or if you have a different way of doing it, then flipping might be great for you. But my goal is, I want to have the option to retire well before I hit retirement age. if I want to. I hope I love my job. It's then as much as I do now, but I want the option to retire early and not, not move some other place or because a company told me to or whatever, do things I don't like. I'm really looking for freedom, and that is through getting little chunks of money every month. And at this stage, I can just reinvest that, right? I keep not touching the income, and I can use it to renovate properties or to buy the next one. But at some point, hopefully I'll take that money and say, do I want to take 3 months off and go travel, or do I want to do something else? Do I want to pay for my kids' college with one of these properties or that kind of thing? I'm looking for freedom, so it makes it pretty easy for me to know which strategy works right. So know yourself and really think about how much time are you willing to commit to it and what's your end goal. Because if your end goal is what mine is and you go out and start flipping houses, you're going to probably be pretty frustrated.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Hey, Matt, I have a question here. What do you say to those clients, first-time home buyers out there? They want to get into investing, but they're buying their house for the first time. What's your recommendation to them in terms of how long they should plan to stay in that house before trying to get their second property? Anything like that to give them?
No, good question. Some of that's going to depend on what kind of loan they're getting, right? Some of those first-time home buyers are going to be using FHA or VA or even just a conventional product that wants them to live there for at least a year. It also would depend how long it will take them to come up with their next down payment if they plan to keep that house and not sell it. But probably my biggest piece of advice for somebody who wants to buy a house, live in it, and later use it as a rental is run the numbers on it. Figure out what kind of cash flow it's going to make, what it would rent for at the beginning. Don't buy the house and then 2 years down the road when you're ready to move up, think, okay, I want to rent this, but I paid $200,000. My mortgage is $1,400. It'll rent for $1,400. Well, you're not going to make any money. By the time you do maintenance, you're going to lose money. So It's just about buying the right property, I think.
Okay.
I think that's really important.
How long they live there would be more of a personal choice.
Okay.
Yeah. And depending on which type of loan it is. I know some of the VA loans and stuff like that, you have to have it as your primary residence for the 12 months. We hear these commercials, right? These all these big commercials. Dan Merrill has them, and all these investment companies, and they say, we'll teach you how to invest in houses using other people's money.
Yeah.
Come on down. Man, you got to debunk it for us. Talk to me. I want to know what that is, and I know some of our listeners do too.
Scam.
Yeah, so I haven't been to one, but Fan in particular has done a ton of advertising in my area. Not so much today, but 2-3 years ago, multiple times a year, it was all over the radio. And from everything I can tell about it, and it really seems like all they're trying to do is get you to buy the next thing. You're probably not going to do any deals, and then when somebody does come out of one of those seminars, really any of them where they kind of, it's almost like pyramid schemes seminar where they just want you to buy the next one. They don't necessarily, they're not in great touch with reality. I don't think they're coming out with the right tools from the guys and girls that I've worked with coming off of those seminars. So I would put it in the scam category. I wouldn't waste my time. I certainly wouldn't waste my money.
Yeah, I went to one, actually. I went to one at Than's, and because I was curious. I said, this guy gets on the radio, and I get the emails and I get the letters, and I'm like, let me go. So I took my father-in-law, actually, and we went out, and it was at a hotel, and they said, full breakfast or whatever. So I was like, free food, and sit down, I'm down. So we went, and we go in, and you're exactly right. So all it is, hey, this is the free section. We want you to buy into the next one. The thing that I would say would be the most interesting was that it almost looks like they're looking for the one or two people in every crowd. They're going to be great no matter what, right? So these two people who, no matter whose program they get into, they're going to crush it. They look for those people, and they find those people, and that pays for the whole class, and they keep moving. But I do know that there are systems and programs out there in place, and do you know of any or can help where maybe we have some people who don't have necessarily all the money to start their down payment or to start investing right away? Are there programs that are legitimate where they can work with other people's money to start their investing career?
I really don't know of any, at least not that advertise and kind of do the things like Than's program. Not that I'm picking on him. I just don't know any of the others by name. So nice.
That means he did his job, right?
Yeah, exactly. My advice to somebody who doesn't have the cash yet is to do two things. One is to learn everything you possibly can. Buy cheap books about real estate off of Amazon or thrift store. There's a bunch of them. Get on biggerpockets.com. It's totally free. Listen to their podcast. There's a ton more now, but I listened to those in the early days. I probably listened to I started about number 50. That's when I caught on. I listened to all 50 that were out, and I listened every week for the next 150 episodes. So even, somebody as hard-headed as me is going to learn some things, and I would put things in to practice that would make me money, which would send me back to learn more. So learn everything you can is number one, and the number two is get around other investors. We have a local meetup. In fact, there's a couple of them. I'm sure that your area has, it's bigger than mine, so you probably have several.
Yeah, we have SRIA, TBRIA. Yeah, so SRIA, Suncoast Real Estate Investment Agency, and then TBRIA, I think is Tampa Bay Real Estate Investment. So they do the same thing.
Yeah. So just get around investors, talk real estate with them, let them know that, don't go in and act like you know everything because you read a couple books. They were doing deals you might not be yet. So, but go in and, see who seems to be doing things the right way. Try to learn from them. Maybe offer to, do some work for them unpaid, just to learn. Because the more you know, the more you're going to be ready as soon as you have cash. Or, if somebody learns that you're really sharp, they might love to loan you some money to get you started because they know that you're going to make them a nice return.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important.
Yeah. Also, bigger pockets, so it is a real deal.
Yeah, I just wrote that down. I'd never heard of it, so I'm definitely going to check it out.
It doesn't cost anything, so
that's cool.
Yeah. So Derrick, you got any other questions?
Actually, yeah. So you mentioned earlier, for the first-time home buyers when they're looking at buying their first property. In terms of, you said as long as they, have some other type of loan they can achieve while they're in that first home that they're living in, then it doesn't really matter the time, right? In terms of how long they decide to stay within that first.
Yeah, well, as long as they're staying in the house long enough to meet whatever agreement they had with the lender that financed their first house. A lot of times you're going to sign something at closing, and Riki, you can speak to this, that you intend to live there for at least a year. So don't commit mortgage fraud by living there for 3 months and then trying to get another loan. But beyond that, once you've met that, you have a down payment for your next property, and you can qualify debt to income wise. You could do it every year if you have the tolerance. I've got a client who is in his late 60s. Him and his wife have moved almost every year of their marriage, and they've been married over 40 years. Something like, no, my wife is not like that. Okay,
mine either. No, she would not be down with that. She would have been in the first house, and I would have moved 40 times.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's totally personal. I have to invest without living in it because I help people move all the time, but the act of moving itself, I hate and she hates more. So we're staying put, and I have to invest in other ways. But yeah, it's totally individual. What are their interests? What are their tolerances for uprooting their life, and sometimes moving into a construction zone, and all the things that come along with investing.
Yep. My wife specifically told me that we would not do that.
So I got it out of the way quick.
Yeah, I was like, just off the table. Got it.
Good to know. No conversation.
So Matt, real quick though, because I think it was our last podcast, so they were talking about with COVID and everything like that, because a lot of people weren't traveling and staying at Airbnbs, that a lot of these investors were now sitting on these properties with zero cash flow. Are you guys seeing any of that? Are you witnessing that?
So 19 of my 20 units are long-term rentals. It was what I know and what I was comfortable with, so I just kept growing that. but I did have a goal of owning something on Pensacola Beach. So that was number 20 that we closed a couple weeks ago. And, to me, as an investor and somebody who's a little bit more aggressive in how I go about it, as soon as things looked bad and the short-term rental ban had been in effect a few weeks, I reached out to somebody I knew that had 2 vacation rental properties to see if they wanted to sell one. Mm-hmm. I'm betting on things to come back. I'm always probably going to bet on America. So America's going to come back and find a way to deal with it, whether or not, we have to do it differently than we used to, or whether or not things go back to normal altogether. But
yeah,
people are still going to go to the beach. So I could, for one, we bought the property at the beginning of May. Our first mortgage payment's not till July 1st. And here we are this week. They lifted the ban, and we have people checking in well before our first payment's ever due. Nice. So it worked out, but it's a great time to buy when people are afraid. But I will say one other thing. I am not a fan of investing with no skin in the game. Getting into as many properties as you can with 0% down, or leveraging every dollar out of the property that you can. Because if you're fully leveraged and you hit a speed bump or a brick wall, like COVID-19, you better have some cash reserves. And, I have some equity in my portfolio, which meant that my mortgage payments on the rentals are a lot lower than what the rent I collect. So as long as 60% of the tenants paid, I was going to be okay. And I felt good about that happening. But yeah, keep yourself a margin of safety in there for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you're saying is you thought about that ahead of time, right? And I think that's the important part, right? Is that when you're going in and buying your properties, it wasn't like, oh, okay, COVID might be. So in January, you weren't like, oh my gosh, COVID might be coming. Let me go ahead and start moving assets around. Right. You were like, no, when I bought this house, I knew ahead of time X amount of houses plus this amount of equity, I needed 60% cash flow to come through, right? And that's important. And we've had other guests who were very numbers oriented. Ben was very numbers oriented. Karen was very numbers oriented. And it seems that seems to be a commonality, right? Yeah. Know your numbers. If you know your numbers forward to back, you'll never really be caught off guard. So I think that is super important. What would you say some of the common mistakes, because you are also an investor, you're also an agent that works with a lot of investors, newer investors. Mm-hmm. What would you say like the common mistake all new investors make that we can help them avoid moving forward here? Give us anything, just something you see a lot.
Yeah, I think it's finding an outlet for their energy and enthusiasm. Most people trying to get into their first investment, they're so gung-ho. They're like a compressed spring, and they're just trying to find a way to get the pressure off right. so that they can jump into something. And sometimes they're not patient. You've got to, I talked about being specific about your criteria, and when you set your criteria and it's not out there, you can't just immediately change your mind and go with the next thing. You have to be patient. So I think not having patience and jumping into either a bad deal or jumping into a bad situation with a tenant or a bad situation because they were too excited about getting it renovated, they hired the wrong contractor. There's so many pitfalls that your enthusiasm can take you off track if you don't have any patience. I know because I made tons of those kind of mistakes in the early days. And I still do occasionally, but the other great thing about real estate is if you buy great deals, you can learn on the job and still not lose money.
Oh, we should coin that. TM, that's trademark. Nobody's taking that. That's ours.
Hey, Matt, a quick question for you. You mentioned it a little bit earlier about Airbnbs. What's your thought on those? You try to stay away from those?
So I mentioned I was aggressive earlier, but I'm also a little bit conservative just because I always kind of take the wait and see approach on things that I can't fully wrap my head around. And one of those things is Airbnbs that are in non-vacation rental areas. If you have something in downtown Pensacola and downtown Pensacola is growing, I absolutely think that makes sense. If you have a house in the middle of Pensacola where there's not really anything to do and there's not big attractions around you, and it looks like a great Airbnb today, I'm a little skeptical that that's going to be the case a year from now. And, I think Pensacola Beach is always going to draw people. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have something like that, a big stadium or a college that you're right next to, if you don't have some kind of draw, what's to stop your neighbors from all doing the same thing? Mm-hmm. And from pushing your nightly rate from, $125 a night where it made sense to $50, where you're in trouble trying to make the mortgage and just get it rented.
Okay, makes sense.
That was great advice right there.
Yeah. So we're about ready to go into our.
Yeah. So.
Well, actually, hold on. Before,
yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, Matt. So everybody hears about it, right? Investment properties, all the tenant horror stories and stuff like that. So you being an investor and having some properties yourself, what's one of the ones? What's one of your worst stories you've heard or you had happen so far?
So I'll give you one as an investor, and I'll give you one as a real estate agent.
Okay.
As an investor, when I was doing my first investment, it was a flip. Apparently, I thought I was Superman because I bought a house built in 1911 and owned by hoarders and vacant for a decade before I bought it.
But you got it for $5, so it was worth it, right?
I got a good deal on it, but I made all sorts of mistakes. And one of the, those mistakes would have me over at 5 a.m. before work or at 10 p.m. after work, carrying out. It had pink and purple shag carpet throughout. Oh. And I decided that I could pull up carpet. Not particularly handy, but I could certainly pull up carpet. So I roll up this carpet that's been on the ground in this hoarder house since the 70s and throw it up on my shoulder to go put it in my truck. That was one of the least pleasant things I've done. I also had to go dumpster diving in the middle of my work day in my work clothes to get a dumpster picked up. We had overfilled it, and I had to climb up in and throw stuff into the yard so that it could get hauled off without pulling down power lines. So that one it was like a horror story a week. But as an agent, I probably have had it worse because, going through investors' properties who didn't take care of their investments the way that I do, I have come out of multiple properties covered in fleas. And there's not a worse day in this business than leaving a property, climbing in your truck, driving half a mile and saying, did I have a new, mole or a scab on my arm? Oh my God, it moved.
Riki loves bugs, so that's right up his alley.
It doesn't show you that. Okay? It does not show you that.
I think Chip and Joanne, Chip would have ate the bug.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got to love those shows.
Yeah,
I love seeing all those memes for those shows where they talk about their budget. Like I catch butterflies and my budget's like $1 million. How accurate is that, right?
When it was funny because
at
the beginning you talked about how you grew up watching, those shows, and instantly the nostalgia I got was Ty Pennington from Flip This House. Do you remember that? And that was a huge show. That to me was the first, every Sunday everybody gets together. We're going to watch Flip This House. Or Extreme Home Makeover, I think it was. Extreme Home Makeover, that's what it was called.
Yeah, where they did the Move That Bus.
Yeah. Move That Bus. Yeah. So they actually did one here in Riverview in my aunt's neighborhood. But we've learned a ton from you, and we're super appreciative. And one of the things before we move into these next set of questions, which I'm really excited about, but you don't know about these yet either, so you'll be excited about them too.
They're designed to put you on the spot.
Yeah. So, but I think something important to talk about, and I have a friend who is an investor, and he's been doing this for a long time, and he's big on Section 8 and doing everything Section 8. But you started to touch on it a little bit, and I think it's important to try to keep the emotion out of the purchase, right? So try to remain as unobjective, as unemotional as possible. It's just a house. It's no different than if you were going and buying, this other thing at the store. You're going to do your research. You're going to do everything on it. Don't get so excited. Don't get so emotional about the deal, because that's when we seem to make maybe some irrational decisions. Would you agree?
Totally agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
My dad did a walkthrough on a property when somebody moved out for me, and he calls me and he's like, "Man, I would be ready to put one of these tenants in the hospital. I just stepped in peanut butter." and there's just peanut butter all over the floor. And leaves, and they left stuff, and he was like hopping mad, and he doesn't own this property. I do. And he's like, why? You don't even seem to care. And I said, I have $1,000 of their deposit. I don't care. We'll pay somebody to clean it up. So
that just became a $200 peanut butter stain. That's awesome. No, it's so true. I mean, you never know. He has this interesting philosophy with how to deal with people he has to evict, right? And so he found out early on that if he just went and did the regular eviction process, that people would a lot of times terrorize his house before they left, right? They would be upset. Mm-hmm. People are bitter and petty. So he did that. So what he started doing was taking this $500 that he would have to pay to evict and just going to the house and saying, hey, here's $100. I'll give you $400 more in a moving truck if you're out by the end of the week, right? And so then he pays them absolutely. the $500, and they're out, and they don't destroy the house. And I was like, you see how quick it's just thinking a little bit differently, right? We can't always act the same. I think it's very cool. So try that out, man. If you ever have to get somebody out, it doesn't sound like you deal with a lot of heavy evictions up there, but in the event that you do.
I try to screen them on the front end, but I do like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, there you go. So let's move in to our questions. We're super excited about these. And so both of you guys are going to get them. These are the questions where we're going to put you guys on the spot. You're not going to know what we're going to ask. I've got a whole list of questions here that I get to pick from. So I'm going to let Riki ask first. He has one for Derrick, and we're really excited. And you're going to answer this one too. So go ahead, Riki.
All right. So you ready for this, Derrick?
I'm ready. What do you got?
So would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
One horse. Would I rather fight one horse-sized duck
or
100 duck-sized horses?
Correct.
100 chihuahuas, really.
First of all, a horse-sized duck is very scary. That's very frightening. I'm not even gonna lie. I'd probably go up against 100 horse-sized ducks. I figure I can.
100 duck-sized horses.
100 duck-sized horses.
Yeah.
I figure I can kick some off of me.
Where are you at, Matt? Are you on the same thing? Are we going with the 100 duck-sized horses?
I'm 100% on the same page. I played soccer growing up. We could deal with the little.
just boot a bunch of horses all over the place. All right, so the next one we're going to.
Should we do a disclaimer to PETA about this?
Yeah.
Yes, there were no duck-sized horses harmed in the making of this podcast. so we're good, PETA. Don't come after us. All right, so if you had to pick your last meal, what would it be?
Seems kind of morbid.
Hey, I want to know.
It would either be a extremely well-cooked medium rare ribeye, or it would be something that not everybody probably has heard of, and that is my favorite breakfast of chocolate and gravy. Chocolate gravy. Sorry.
Chocolate gravy.
Not chocolate and gravy, or chocolate gravy?
Yeah, just chocolate gravy and batter bread. Have you ever heard of either of those things?
No, is it just regular like chocolate syrup?
We just got some Nesquik that we're just pouring on top.
Sounds like we used to call that cake.
Yeah, it's basically dessert for breakfast. We used to make it homemade, but some of your good, famous biscuit places, I know like Biscuit Love in Nashville, they make their own. So if you're ever somewhere and you see chocolate gravy, if you like chocolate, it's amazing.
Oh, I'm going to have to try that.
I know.
I've never even heard of that.
Me either.
Have you?
Chocolate gravy?
I've never heard of Biscuit Love.
Biscuit Love.
That's what I'm looking at.
I got love for
as soon as I get out of here.
I heard of Biscuit Love.
Andy, what about you? Have you heard of chocolate gravy?
No, not really. I have not heard of chocolate gravy, just thick chocolate. Like chocolate syrup.
Like fondue?
Yeah.
You're like, the words just don't seem to make sense together.
So you guys took biscuits and gravy to a whole new level.
I mean, I kind of got down on the chocolate rain scene when that song came out.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's a good one.
What about you, Derrick? What's your...
My last meal, it'd probably be something I normally eat all the time. I wouldn't change it up too much.
Comfort food?
Comfort food, exactly.
So what's your go-to comfort food?
Probably salmon.
Some salmon?
Yeah, some teriyaki salmon. I don't
Him and I
don't
had the
eat meat.
greatest conversation the other day. Yeah, he was telling me all he eats is just fish.
I eat
and-
seafood, fish.
Yeah.
So you're a pescatarian?
That's
Is that
it.
what they call it?
That's it.
Pescatarian.
Hey,
I had no
awesome.
idea. As long as I've known you, I guess I've never actually paid attention.
You haven't
to
bought
these-
me dinner.
shots fired.
So fix that one after the show's over.
Yeah, just called you
All
out.
right. Okay, so dinner at my house then.
All right.
You're all invited. Okay, so one of the fun ones that we have, Matt, and Riki can attest to this, we've actually had the same answer both times we've asked this. So please keep it going with what is the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you on your real estate journey? Like whether it be a showing or anything. We just want to know.
Oh gosh, I have no idea. That would take a little bit of thought. I know that when I was trying to sell a house before I had a license, an agent showed up early and I live in this house. I'm trying to sell my own house. I've got an agent. Somebody shows up early to sell it, like half an hour early, and I'm in the shower. So I get out of the shower, I come to the top of the stairs, in my towel, and there's somebody sitting downstairs at the dining room table, and I'm like, "Hello?" And she says, "Oh, I'm here to show the house. I'm a little early." And she sees me in the towel, and I don't know, from downstairs, I don't know what she saw, but so I go get dressed and leave, and this lady never leaves my dining room table. Just hanging out with that.
For breakfast and a show, man. That sounds so. Which is funny. So you did answer the same way, except you were the other guy.
You were the guy.
Yeah. Every realtor has told us, and I do these posts on my social media page because anytime I start to hear something happening too many times, I'm like, okay, who else has done this? And so I put up this post about what the most embarrassing thing was, and everybody has walked in on a naked person and is showing. Like, this is a very common thing. You're not alone. Where you might be on the uncommon side is that you were the naked one. That might have been the weird thing.
The tables have turned.
So that's hysterical. That's gonna go
So
down.
that's a new way to sell a house there.
Oh man.
Yeah. What about
All
you?
right.
What about you? I know you got some good ones.
Definitely haven't no naked showings for sure. I think the like the first showing I did out here in Florida, summertime, hadn't really gotten used to the humidity out here. Didn't really know what to expect. I went out and to do an open house, struggling with the lockbox, getting the lockbox off, and in a matter of the 7 minutes that it took me to get the lockbox off, I sweated out probably half my body weight. And I had to do this open house, and I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt for some reason. I mean, I'm in Florida. I don't know why.
Gotta look nice, man.
Trying to look nice. And I had these humongous sweat stains that just covered my entire body. My head is just soaking wet.
That's so funny.
And luckily I had a jacket in my car.
Oh, it just made it worse.
Which made me hotter, of course.
Yeah.
But
Oh no, I would have opened up those doors, sweat stains and all. Like, come on in, guys.
Yeah, right.
It's hot. The AC definitely
We
works.
do this
now.
together. Yeah, Riki and I went to an open house not long ago, and we were standing outside, and we could see everybody inside. And we're standing at this big giant window, and I'm like,
The door was locked.
knocking on the door. The door's locked. Some people are walking by. People are seeing us in the window, and we're looking at each other like, should we just go home? Like, do we go? Like, it was, but they had Olive Garden.
Yeah.
So I felt very obligated to stay. It was I had to stay for this Olive Garden. But yeah, funny things happen, man, at these open houses. So thank you for being the naked man at a showing. That
Yeah, I'm glad.
that is awesome.
Somebody's gotta do it.
Yeah. So the last question I think, and we'll wrap it up with this, is if you could have dinner with 3 people, any 3 people, dead or alive, who would they be?
At the same time?
At the same time.
At the same
3
time.
people.
All right, at the same time.
So they've
And
got
me and Riki don't count. I know you want to eat with me, Riki, and Derrick, but we don't count.
Well, it's going to be Derrick, so I can buy him some fish since you won't.
thank you. Appreciate it, Matt. You're a good guy.
I got you.
Oh, that was good.
I think maybe, gosh, that one's really hard. I like to I think Richard Branson would be on the list. He sounds
good one.
extremely interesting. And then I would want to get somebody from history. So I'm going to go with Teddy Roosevelt.
Another good one.
Wow. Okay. A little off the beaten path there. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, so we
Yeah.
got one more. So we've got history. We've got
Richard Branson.
current. So Richard Branson. That's a little eccentric.
I would just want to have dinner on his island.
I know. I just want to just take a
Yeah.
ride on his plane. Like,
I think you can go stay there for like $30,000 a week.
oh, did you
That's
just
it?
offer to take us? Is that what just
is
happened?
that it?
You can buy Derrick his fish on
Can
that
we put
island.
something along the bottom of the screen that says this is not an offer to take anybody?
We need a disclaimer at the bottom. Well, very cool, man. Well,
Yeah.
we appreciate you. And one of the things we wrap up every episode with is, if one person who wants to do what you do, if you could give them one piece of advice, moving forward, starting today, what would that be?
Consume information. Try to grow your knowledge about whatever it is you want to do. If you want to be an excellent agent, start to read about being an agent. Listen to podcasts about being an agent. Books if you can find them. Same thing for investors. There's so much information out there that you can have a huge head start before you even get into whatever your interest is. And there's really, if you're truly interested in doing something, there's no reason to go into it blind anymore. The information's out there. It's free. You can listen to it in your car. You can read it, in the morning, get up 30 minutes earlier and read about whatever your interest is. But just consume knowledge, and you're going to be more comfortable and more successful when you get into whatever that is.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
That's great advice, man.
Yeah,
Thank you so
fantastic.
much for being here today, man.
Yeah,
We really
yeah.
appreciate you.
Thank
Yeah,
you for
Derrick.
having me.
Yep. Thank you for being here as well. It was
you
a
for having me.
pleasure. It was
Yes,
fun.
thanks for
fun.
being our first in-person guest, man.
Yeah,
That's
that's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to change that moving forward. No, I'm just kidding. We had a lot of fun. I'll buy him some fish when we get out of here. So, but hey, for all of our listeners, thank you so much. We are on episode 6 of the Briefing Room. We're doing this for you. I mean, as much as we like getting together and having some jokes, we really want to bring you guys information that helps. And that'll take you to a better place. So if there's anything that you guys are looking for, if there's any content requests or any interview requests, please send them our way. We would love to have you. Click below. Let's subscribe. Find us moving forward. Find us on where you can find Riki on Instagram at.
Yeah, Instagram at Riki_Hasty.
And I'm Josh, the title guy. And
The real estate guy 111.
the real estate guy 111. And I think audibly we still have, there he is.
that's
Where can we find you on social, Matt?
So you can find me on social media at RealtorMattJ or RealtorMattJ.com.
RealtorMattJ.com or at RealtorMattJ. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. We can't wait to see you next week. Subscribe below. We'll see you next time.
Yep.